welcome back to my channel. So recently, Disneyland and Disney World have made some changes to their
Disability Access Service,
DAS Pass. And as someone who has used the DAS Pass in the past due to various disabilities and medical conditions, I thought it would be very interesting to talk about how these changes impact individuals with disabilities, and also talk about the other options that are available. Disney does offer various accommodations for guests who have disabilities. So if the reasonable accommodation of the DAS Pass is no longer available to you, there are some other options that you could possibly pursue that might work for you as well. So these changes to the DAS Pass system will start on May 20th at Disney World in Florida and June 18th in Disneyland in California. What exactly is the DAS Pass?
Basically, back in the early 2000s, there was something called the Guest Access Card, which was basically a little red piece of paper that you would get at guest services if you were disabled, and it would allow you to access the lines. Because back then, none of the lines or queues at Disney World attractions were ADA compliant. So if you used a wheelchair, a lot of times you would have to enter through the exit line or take an alternative route. So you would essentially go to guest services, get one of these little red passes, and then every time you wanted to go on a ride, you would go up to a cast member at the entrance of the ride, and they would give you a return time. So you would return to the entrance of the ride at your return time, and a cast member would escort you through either the exit line or, through an alternative entrance in your wheelchair. Well, after that, they ended up rolling out something called the first version of the Disability Access Service. And essentially, this would be the same thing, and it was granted to individuals who were not able to wait in a standard queue line due to a disability. So that's just kind of a little history behind the Disability Access Service Pass.
So, even then, I wouldn't really say that you got to skip the line. You were still waiting in line, it's just that you weren't physically standing in the line. It was more like a virtual queue line. And the same idea was used when the DAS Pass was created. Essentially, the DAS Pass is an extension that is added to the Disney app once you get approved for the service. And you select a ride, and you're put in a virtual queue. So instead of physically standing in the standby line, you're waiting in a virtual queue. So then if you need to, you're able to address any medical related or disability related things that you need to address outside of the standing line, because you're able to wait in a virtual queue. That was really helpful for me so that I could access the rides. I was able to address any medical needs that I had while I was waiting in line, because I didn't have to stand in the actual standby line. I was in a virtual queue line. And then when it was time for me to arrive at the ride, I then went through the Fast Pass or the Genie Plus lane, or Lightning lane, I guess you would call it. And then I would only have to wait physically in line during the time that I had to wait in the Lightning lane line. And then once I got to the front of the line, I then had to physically wait in line again while the accessible cart became available. So again, the DAS Pass does not allow you to skip the line. You still have to wait in line. It's just that you might not be physically in the standby line. You're either in the Lightning lane or you're in the virtual queue. Well, anyway, so the new DAS Pass system is only available to individuals that have disabilities like autism or similar. So it is no longer available to individuals that have physical disabilities. And Disney has said that they decided to make these changes for various reasons. It had to do with abuse of the system, and possibly also had to do with, well, they didn't say this, but based on my research, it might also have to do with previous lawsuits that they had to deal with, along with the fact that they're losing money and that they're having issues with crowd control within the parks. There's been a statistic going around that essentially the amount of DAS passes that have been requested since the implementation of Genie Plus has tripled in the past couple years, and so their conclusion was that there must be an enormous amount of abuse of the DAS Pass system, so they decided to implement these changes. Basically, there are still a lot of different accommodations that are available to individuals with disabilities if they no longer qualify for the DAS Pass. However, what's really interesting now is that before, you were able to go to a cast member in the park once you arrived and talk to someone in guest services and discuss these accommodations once you arrived in the park. Well, now you can no longer talk to someone in person at the park, and also the phone number for disability services has been disconnected. So you can no longer call disability services ahead of time and talk about what accommodations are available to guests before you arrive in the park. Now, prior to these changes, you were able to call this number for disability services and talk to them about other accommodations that were available. You were not able to apply for the DAS Pass by using this number, but you could at least call them and talk to them about what accommodations were available, such as ADA compliant waiting lines, how to rent wheelchairs or scooters, and also talk about the other accommodations that are available in the park. But now, I've been trying to speak with someone for a while now, and the only way to talk to someone in disability services is if you already have purchased tickets and you're planning on visiting the park within the next 30 days. So if you want to plan your trip ahead of time and make sure that you're actually able to access the park properly with a disability, you can't know that information until you've already purchased a ticket and it's 30 days prior to your 30 days or less before you are going to be arriving at the park, which poses quite a bit of a problem, honestly, because if you find out that you cannot be accommodated, your tickets and hotel stay will not be refunded. So it seems like, in a way, Disney inadvertently deterring disabled guests from visiting the parks. I don't believe that this is something that they meant to do. It's kind of happening. So I'm hoping that they change this policy within the next couple months, and it's going to be easier to speak with a cast member about park reasonable accommodations before you actually book your tickets. But anyway, so let's just go over what accommodations are available outside of the DAS Pass. So like I said before, the DAS Pass is only available to individuals who have autism or similar. It is not available to individuals whose disability is solely physical in nature. And the DAS Pass allows you to wait in a virtual queue line instead of having to physically wait in the standby line. So some alternative reasonable accommodations that Disney is providing its guests include Rider Switch, which allows you to switch spots in line with someone else in your party. So basically, if you have a physical disability and you can't wait in line, you can have someone in your party wait in line for you, and once they get to the front of the line, they ride the ride, you can then switch with them, and then that way you avoid having to wait in the standby line. However, this only works if you have a party of more than 2 people, and because if you need a caregiver with you in order to address a medical issue, you then can't use ride or switch because that person would have to leave the disabled person by themselves. So you would have to have more than 2 people in your party. Secondly, the whole point of going on vacation with family is to spend time with your family and friends. So I don't really think it's right that Disney thinks it's okay to separate guests from their party if they have a disability. Non-disabled guests are able to enjoy the park and stay with their party the entire time. But if you're disabled, you have to constantly be separated from them. So that does not provide these disabled guests, with equal enjoyment and access to the park. But it might work for some people. Now, another option that they provide at Disney World, according to the website, but not Disneyland, is the ability to re-enter the line if you have to leave the line temporarily. But again, it says that you can only leave the line by yourself. You are not allowed to bring someone else with you. So if you're in the situation where you need to have a caregiver come with you in order to address a disability or medical related need, you would then lose your place in line. On Disney's website, they also don't detail exactly how long you're able to leave the line. It just says briefly, which that's not very clear what briefly means. Does that mean 1 minute? Does that mean 10? Does it mean 5 minutes? What exactly does briefly mean? And also, I'm not really sure how someone is able to leave the line and then go back in line without disturbing a bunch of other guests and having to like squeeze through the crowd and weave their way back up to the point where the rest of their party is. I could see how maybe someone who doesn't use a mobility aid would be able to do that, but if you're in a wheelchair or you use a walker or anything like that, it's gonna basically be impossible to exit the line and then re-enter. That's why people use the DAS pass, so they don't have to constantly exit and enter the line in order to address a disability or medical related need. So I hope, I don't know, by trial and error, I guess, Disney kind of figures this out without causing guests a bunch of stress. I really hope that they figure out a way to reasonably accommodate individuals with physical disabilities in the proper way. It does say though that Disney does provide return times on specific rides, but it says this on the Disneyland website. It does not say that Disney World provides return times. So I'm not sure if that's going to be available at all parks or just Disneyland. And also on Disneyland's website, it says that return times are only available on specific rides. And it's basically the older rides, like Pirates of the Caribbean, Peter Pan in Flight, the Jungle Cruise, you know, mostly the older classic rides that might have not been updated to be ADA compliant yet. Also, the websites, well, both websites talk about different physical things that they have changed in the parks in order to make the rides more accessible and ADA compliant, such as having transfer devices at rides. So if you have a physical disability, you can use those to assist you onto the ride. However, again, it's very vague what that means. Like, what is this transfer device? You know, is it a Hoyer lift? Or is it a transfer board? Like, what exactly does that mean? And this is, again, another reason why you should be able to talk to someone in disability services more than 30 days prior to your reservation, and you should not have to reserve tickets in order to speak to someone in the disability services department.
So, like I said before, Disneyland's website is slightly different than Disney World's website. Both parks provide different reasonable accommodations due to the fact that certain rides are ADA compliant and some aren't, based on probably the age of the ride, I'm assuming. So if you scroll down on the Disability Service website, under the Mobility tab, that's what I'm under right now, it does tell you about, wheelchair accessible parking, wheelchair rentals. I guess they have cushions on certain rides, and they have restroom information available. Wait, I want to see what these cushions are. Let's see. So they can, guests with mobility disabilities use cushions on a daily basis on their wheelchair or when they transfer to alternate seating, may use portable seat cushions on select attractions. Portable cushions must fit reasonably within the attraction and experience without obstructing the safety. Okay. Interesting. So they don't provide the seat cushions. You're just able to use them if needed, I guess is how it works. You can take the one off your chair and put it onto the seat. Okay. That's cool. That makes sense. So, if we scroll down here more, it says that they have wheelchair accessible vehicles, which are the ones that you can take your wheelchair directly on, so you don't have to transfer out of your wheelchair. They also have transfer access vehicles that have seats that fold or doors that swing out to make it easier to transfer on. Yeah, and this is like the transfer device thing that I was talking about earlier, how some of the attractions have transfer devices. Now, the last time I went on Pirates of the Caribbean, I asked about this transfer device, and the cast member had no idea what I was talking about. So if you click on transfer devices here, it says that Pirates of the Caribbean is one of the rides that has this transfer device. So it says Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, yeah, it seems like the cast members should know what this transfer device is, because it's a low boat that you have to transfer into. Some sort of assistive transfer device would be really helpful. So, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe Disney just needs to train their employees better when it comes to accessibility. But this is, again, what I said earlier, why you should be able to actually call disability services and talk to them. Because I want to know what is this transfer device? And also, like, which rides have, the transfer vehicles with the swing out doors, which ones have the transfer devices, the transfer vehicles that have the folding seats, what's what. Yeah, we shouldn't be able to know that before we go to the park. And then they also have accommodations for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, or people who are blind or have low vision. And then, they have the neurodivergent section, service animal section as well.
Also, I feel like Disney assumes that just because something is ADA compliant, it automatically accommodates every type of physical disability, which is not exactly true. And in order to be ADA compliant, you do have to also provide individuals with disabilities with reasonable accommodations so that they can access your service or product equally. So I think that there are a few things that Disney can do to improve the reasonable accommodations that are available to individuals with disabilities that visit their park. I think that if they don't want to provide the basic DasPass services to all individuals with disabilities that might require those services, I think that they should at least have a way for you to have a sort of adapted version of DasPass if you need it. For example, you might be able to wait in line in a standard queue for a certain amount of time, but not longer than that amount of time. So for example, someone might be able to stand in or wait in a standard queue line for up to 20 or 30 minutes. But after that amount of time, that's when it starts to affect them in a negative way. So they should be able to apply for the DAS pass, get approved, but they can only request to wait in a virtual queue through the DAS pass if the wait time is more than 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever that designated amount of time is that the guest provides the cast member with. Also, there could be another type of pass that is available to individuals with certain disabilities or medical conditions that allows them to use the Lightning Lane or the DAS Pass lane if they need to leave the standard queue line to address a disability or medical related need while waiting to get on a ride. This way, they won't be disturbing other guests when they try to re-enter the line, and it also provides the individual with the ability to still access the ride and not have to start over in line. So basically, for example, let's say you're waiting in line, the line is 60 minutes, and you've waited in line for, let's say, 30 minutes, and then you have an issue related to your disability or medical need that you need to address. You have to exit the line in order to address that issue. Now, currently, they're saying that you will be able to re-enter the line, but only if you exit independently. But if you need to exit with a member of your party, and that's the only other member that is with you, but you need that other member of your party in order to address that medical issue, you would then lose your place in line and you'd have to start over at the beginning. To avoid this issue in the past, individuals would get a DAS pass, but since they can't get that anymore, they would have to start over again. So this other accommodation that I'm proposing would basically allow individuals with disabilities who have to exit the line, it would allow them to use the Lightning Lane or Genie Plus lane once they return from addressing their medical issue, or there could be another type of DAS Pass service that is like the current DAS Pass, but it's slightly different and would accommodate individuals that need this type of accommodation. But anyway, I still really love Disneyland and Disney World. I plan on visiting Disneyland again in the near future, so look forward to that video. And if you have any suggestions for some reasonable accommodations that Disney could provide its guests with disabilities with, please leave a comment down in the description below. Also, what are your thoughts on the changes that have been made to the DAS Pass system and the Disability Services Department at Disneyland and Disney World? I really hope that Disney continues to improve the reasonable accommodations that they provide their guests with disabilities, and that they make their Disability Services Department more accessible to guests, so that Disney can continue to be the most magical place on earth for all guests. Alright, well, that is it for today's video. If you've enjoyed today's content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that little bell button down below, and maybe leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear from you all. I hope you have a phenomenal day, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys. Alright, well, that is it for today's video. I hope